Saturday Morning Inspection. I'm Nick Rudman, joined as always for our first episode of the new year. That's Andrew Mize. We are not your typical big sports media show. We don't have the fancy suits. We don't have the big budgets. We don't have the talking heads. We got to make up for it. We got to work ridiculously hard, do our research, and as always, be ridiculously good looking.
That's right, Nick. We are not big sports media. We don't have billions of dollars. All we have is our knowledge, our good looks, and our ability to bring you this show. And the first show of the new year, we can't say enough how important you, the viewer, are to us here at Saturday Morning Inspection. We can't do it without you. So whether you're watching on YouTube, Apple, or Spotify, or any of your listening devices that you may use, we could use your help. So if you give us a comment, like, subscribe to our YouTube, all of that goes a very long way. As always, on YouTube, on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts, we're at Saturday Morning Inspection. On Facebook and Twitter, we're at SMI Football Show. And you can always find all of the late-breaking news, possibly sign up for our newsletter, and any other videos that we have posted on our website, smishow.com. Nick, we have a pretty great show today. We always have a good show, but this one is a little bit, I think we have some new segments that we're bringing up, and I think it's going to be quite the show. So stay tuned if you're interested.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I'm excited, and if you're ready, let's get right into it.
All right. Our first story of the day, the Browns suck. We all knew that, though, but I thought we would just reiterate a little bit. You want to get us started on this at all?
Right, and the Browns, with the tough loss on Christmas Day, they lost 24-22 to the Green Bay Packers in Lambeau Field. You mentioned the Browns suck. I think that's a little unfair. There's one Brown that really sucks, and that's Baker Mayfield. He threw 4 interceptions. 3 of them were absolutely terrible throws, terrible reads, just bad all around the board. The Browns as a team actually played really well. Running game defense, solid job. Good job out of that offensive line up front for Cleveland. But Baker Mayfield stunk all game long. He ended up throwing away his 4th interception of the game, sealed the victory for Green Bay. Right now, Cleveland Browns, with one of the more talented rosters in the NFL, are 7-8, last place in the AFC North.
Nick, you're being a little unfair to our friend Baker Mayfield. If he was on a team that possibly had 2 Pro Bowl caliber running backs, Pro Bowl caliber receiver, maybe a Pro Bowl tight end caliber, a pretty solid offensive line, possible defensive player of the year candidate, edge rusher, a solid safety or 2, a good linebacker, then I would say, okay, all of this hate is warranted. But he couldn't possibly have a team that good.
Obviously, you're being facetious because he has that and more. I mean, ever since he came into the league, the Browns have surrounded Baker with whatever he wanted and everything he needed. And I just jotted down a quick list here. This isn't even everything. So this is after a second year in the NFL, right? The Cleveland Browns promoted his play caller, Freddie Kitchens, to head coach. That was a disaster. They traded for Odell Beckham Jr. That didn't work out. They traded for Kareem Hunt. That, still Baker sucks. They traded for Wyatt Teller, one of those Pro Bowl offensive linemen you talked about. Still Baker can't get it done. They signed offensive tackle Jack Conklin from Tennessee. Great offensive lineman, was named to a Pro Bowl All-Pro guy. Baker still can't get it done. They drafted another offensive lineman, Jedrick Willis, with a top 10 pick 2 years ago, and they signed Austin Hooper, a Pro Bowl tight end from the Atlanta Falcons. Literally, the Cleveland Browns have done everything to surround Baker Mayfield with quality talent at wide receiver, at tight end, at running back, and offensive line, and they've given him his preferred play caller. They even have an offensive-minded head coach in Kevin Stefanski in Cleveland, and Baker Mayfield still can't get it done. This is such a disappointment. There's been a lot of bad busts in NFL history with guys who have absolutely stunk. I think we have to put in some context here that Baker can't get it done despite having the greatest structure around him in the NFL by far.
This is way different than us bashing the Jets and Zach Wilson. Because Zach Wilson, the Jets suck, and his coach probably sucks, and the team around him really isn't good. Can you name a good Jets wide receiver? I really can't think of too many that they have. I can't think of too many good offensive weapons or defensive weapons they really have, period. He's got everything. it was a bad team when he got there, but they've turned it around into a good team with good pieces, and the only bad piece is him.
Yeah, you bring up a good point with Zach Wilson, the Jets, right? Justin Fields, Trevor Lawrence, a lot of these young quarterbacks, they come into the league, and even after a few years, right, there's some other guys that have had some struggles since they've come to the year. They don't have the structure and support around them. And I did a little research and I did some digging, and I was trying to figure out what were good comparisons to what Baker Mayfield has around him in Cleveland. And two guys came to mind. That's what Dak Prescott, has in Dallas and got in Dallas coming to the NFL, and what Patrick Mahomes has. Both Prescott and Mahomes have offensive-minded head coaches and quality offensive coordinators. Both Prescott and Mahomes, like Mayfield, have been surrounded with quality wide receivers, quality offensive linemen, and good running backs, and teams that are willing to draft, trade, and sign those kind of players to support the quarterbacks. And there you can see, as you look at the numbers there, right, as we put them up on the screen, as they're up on the screen, just how bad Mayfield has been in comparison with those two guys. Like when you look at wins and losses, both Prescott and Mahomes blow them out of the water. You look at passer rating, not even close. Touchdown interception ratio, not even close. Look at that big goose egg in division titles, 0. Prescott just clinched his second. Mahomes has won 3 in a row.
I'd like to point something out, too. Prescott has more wins than Mayfield, and he missed like all of last season.
Well, I will say this. We took out last year from these numbers with Prescott because of the injury. So I didn't want to – because that would have so that would have made the numbers look a little different. So, but even then, right, it's leaps and bounds different, right? You look at Mayfield is so about 92-ish, 92 is average for NFL passer rating. Baker, with all those talents, is below average, right? He had Jarvis Landry, Odell Beckham, Austin Hooper, Pro Bowl offensive line, offensive-minded head coach and coordinator, and he still is below average. It is such a situation that's gone down south in Cleveland really, really fast. I think Kevin Stefanski, the head coach, I'm curious your thoughts on this. I think the right move for Cleveland at this point, if they're really serious about winning, I think they have to make a quarterback switch. They're not. Stefanski has already said they're sticking with Mayfield. At this point, you got to show your team that you're serious and a contender, because when you look at these numbers, NFL players aren't dumb. They see what Prescott has done. They see what Mahomes has done. They've seen what other young quarterbacks have done with even less talent. Mayfield isn't even close. I mean, could Kevin Stefanski face a revolt on his hands if he doesn't make a change and Cleveland misses the playoffs?
I think if Cleveland misses the playoffs, everyone, owner, GM, and coach need to sit down and they need to say, hey, look, apples to apples, let's look at our team versus whoever wins the division in the AFC North, okay? Let's look at our team. Apples to apples. We have by far the best team in the AFC North, and it's not even close. We have the most talent on our roster, and we can't make it happen. So, this is the thing. We've been hindered at the quarterback position. We need to seriously consider making a switch. And I'm not, okay, if you want to be like, oh, we gave a first overall pick for Mayfield, like we got to stick with him, that's fine. Okay, first round pick for Mayfield, I get it. You want to protect your investment. You're a big fan of sunk cost fallacy. You don't want to go with the Cardinals route where you get a guy, he sucks, and you move on from him and get another guy, and it ends up working out really well for you for the most part. They need to at least bring in a guy, like a second or third round quarterback they bring in, and have a competition. They need to, at least push Baker to be better. And I think they'll find that he's not going to be better and that they need to move on with the person that they've selected. But I think they need to pick a challenger to Mayfield, whether it's through free agency signing, like Gardner Minshew, someone we love, or whether they draft a mid-round quarterback to come in and give him a little bit of a push and see if he can handle it.
Yeah, and I agree for the offseason. That's the move Cleveland definitely has to go. I think if you're a Browns fan, though, you have to be so frustrated and disappointed with Baker and the Browns, because it's not every year in that division where the Ravens are going to be decimated by injuries like no one's ever seen before.
Yeah,
it's not. Joe Burrow and the Bengals are young. They're going to get better.
They're scary. They're legitimately, the receiving core of the Bengals has me very frightened for the next couple of years because they're turning out to be bona fide superstars, all of them.
Yeah, yeah, you're exactly right. The Bengals are legitimate. The Steelers are down, but if they get another quarterback to come in for Roethlisberger, I think Tomlin's a good enough coach. Maybe they can turn that around. This was a golden opportunity for Cleveland. It really was. And Baker Mayfield, through his poor play, has let that organization down.
Not even down. They're in last place.
Last place.
Last place. Ravens decimated by injuries. Steelers, who have a mummy as a quarterback. And the Bengals, who are a young organization, young coach, who really shouldn't have an option, have now walked themselves into first place in the division. Like, what are you doing, Cleveland? And, one quick thing, a tidbit I've heard, and this could be completely false, but rumors around the Pittsburgh mill is that Pittsburgh coaches and GMs have had quite an interest in Ravens second-string quarterback Tyler Huntley as a possible prospect to bring into Pittsburgh next year. So let's keep an eye out for that.
Yeah, definitely. I think the AFC North is going to be an eye-opening position for quarterback moves in the offseason, and it should start really with Cleveland and moving on from Baker Mayfield.
Absolutely. But let's move to another AFC North team. What do you think?
Yeah, so let's move on to the I'll call it the big matchup of the weekend. You had the Kansas City Chiefs at home against Pittsburgh Steelers. It wasn't really a big matchup. The Chiefs demolished the Steelers 36-10. They were up 30-0 in the third quarter. This game was not close, was not competitive at all. The Chiefs have won their 8th in a row since starting 3-4. They're now 11-4, clear favorite in the AFC, clear number 1 seed. But I want to talk a little bit about Kansas City here, and we were right there. You and I think we're both on the same page, along with 99% of football fans and sports America, with the Chiefs. What is wrong with the Chiefs? When they're 3-4, they're struggling. Things look bad. They're falling apart. Mahomes is playing bad. Defense is bad. Are they falling? Have they already fallen off so quick? And we're looking back on it now. We were all wrong. And it's like, kind of trying to think about why were we all wrong? Why did we get it wrong? I think one of the things that has happened in football, and like we like to do with everything, it all goes back to the Patriots and Bill Belichick. The Patriots were the number 1 team or number 1, number 2 team in the AFC for 2 decades. And every year they were so good and so consistent, right? And, I think I have it here from 2003 to 2019, that's 17 straight years. They started 4-3 and better after 7 games, right? They were the number 1 team, 4-3 and better every year. Right, they were winning record. Usually pretty. 5 wins, 6 wins, at least 4 wins after 7 games. The Chiefs were not. They were a losing team this year. And I think one of the things that happened, since the Patriots moved on from Tom Brady and are kind of rebuilding, we look for the next in sports, right? When Michael Jordan's retired, what's the next Michael Jordan? Is Kobe Bryant the next Michael Jordan? Is LeBron James the next Michael Jordan? Tiger Woods has obviously gotten hurt in his career. Who's the next Tiger Woods? Even in the NFL, we're like, well, who's the next Tom Brady? Who's the next, right? And sometimes there isn't a next. Sometimes something is so special and so dominant that it has kind of spoiled us, and there isn't a next. The Kansas City Chiefs aren't the next Patriots. We thought they might be, right? Because they have the quarterback, the coach, the offensive coordinator, the home field advantage. They got all these things that the New England Patriots had, but they're not the next Patriots because there will never be another Patriots. And I think that's why we all got Kansas City and the Chiefs wrong earlier in the year. We came into the season thinking this was going to be the beginning of another Patriot kind of dynasty, and that level of consistency, basically season in, season out, month after month, game after game, year after year, was just going to happen for Kansas City. And the fact is it's not. There will never be another Patriots, and there will never be another team as consistent as the Patriots were for 2 decades. And so we have to understand that, and I think that's why we all got Kansas City wrong. The Chiefs are great. They're a top contender, but they're not at that level of consistency, and I think we expected that, and I think that's how we got them all wrong.
Yeah, and I think a big thing that the Patriots have that the Kansas City Chiefs don't have and that we haven't seen happen yet, it hasn't come to pass yet, because we've talked about it in one of our previous episodes, is the Patriots are able to get good players, and then build around them through the draft consistently. The Chiefs were lucky and fortunate enough to draft some really good players. They got Travis Kelce. They've got Tyreek Hill. They got Patrick Mahomes. They've got a solid core of good receivers and receiving options for Patrick Mahomes to throw to. And Patrick Mahomes was on a rookie deal. So was Tyreek Hill. So was Travis Kelce at the time. And now that, now that the next phase of this comes in, where Patrick Mahomes' deal really hits next year, and then they're going to also have to, Tyreek Hill's deal, Kelsey on top of Kelsey's deal, on top of everybody else. They're not going to have all of these weapons that they've been able to tack on, the Chandler Jones, the other guys. They've been able to put on the defense side of the ball and things like that. It really hasn't been that successful on the defensive side of the ball. But they're going to have to really thin this team out to compensate for Patrick Mahomes' contract. So we were wrong, and we did put too much expectation on them because we haven't really seen them adjust in the coming years to big contracts like the Patriots have. What Patrick Mahomes did not take a Tom Brady team-friendly deal to win more and build towards the future. He absolutely did not. He got a record-setting contract that's going to hinder them for the next at least 3 to 4 years until it becomes the norm as that contract number. But you're absolutely right. There isn't another next Patriots, and the Chiefs haven't done anything to prove that they're the next Patriots either.
Yeah, and I think what it comes down to, you mentioned the contract, and that's the big thing. I think we kind of just expected, because when you watch the games, you kind of forget that the salary cap has such a big impact, and players that they had to cut or they couldn't, they have to rely on young guys and rookies and things. And the challenges with Kansas City, right? They've started slow and adjusted. I think, like you talked about, as the Mahomes deal goes along, they're going to get even more inconsistent. I think this is probably one of their last hurrahs, like we've talked about a bunch. And, I think we're so excited as a sports culture. Oh, what's the next dynasty? And I think this is there isn't another dynasty in football right now. We see with how close and competitive it is and how tightly grouped all the teams are, and there is no clear favorite to win the Super Bowl, as well as the Chiefs have been playing. And I think we should appreciate the Chiefs, what they have now, because I think, like you said, once these deals start kicking in, this roster will take a big hit, and the team will not be nearly as good.
And I'd like to take a second to appreciate how competitive football has been this year. We haven't seen this in a long time, and it's very quite interesting because at any given moment, there isn't a clear-cut favorite, I think, for best team right now. I think, Green Bay struggled, albeit they won, but struggled against Baltimore's second-string quarterback and decimated team by injuries. They turn it around, and they beat the Browns, though. But Green Bay looks strong, but also they've had stumbles this season as well. So has the Rams, so have the Cardinals, so have the Chiefs, so has everybody who we've said has been good. So I'm really interested to see how these last 2 games of the season play out, and moving on to the playoffs, what it looks like going forward.
Yeah, it will be interesting. And you brought up competitiveness and the league and how close it is right now. I think we're going to have to talk about definitely one of the guys who's been on the wrong side of some of that competition so far, and that's head coach of the Los Angeles Chargers, Brandon Staley. They dropped a big loss over the weekend. They lost to a very bad Houston team, 41-29. And I think sort of the story here with the Chargers is the fact that they have just been gifted with a level of talent in the NFL, right? They have a generational young quarterback in Justin Herbert. They've got a star pass rusher in Nick Bosa. They've got good, solid weapons outside of Herbert on offense. Austin Eckler's a heck of a weapon at running back, catching the ball and running the ball. They've got Mike Williams, Keenan Allen at wide receiver, Jared Cook at tight end. They drafted Derwin James at safety. They drafted Rashawn Slater at tackle. He's been a heck of a player. Yet they're sitting here at 8-7, right? And the thing with the Chargers is how many winnable games they've lost. And I think it goes a lot to the head coach. And I'm curious what your thoughts are on here, but I've got 2 big ones. And, Brandon Staley has been a big analytics guy. He's like, hey, I use a lot of data and research to drive my decision making. And the first one, I think people talk about the 4th down attempts. I think that's important, but there's one other thing I've noticed with this Chargers team that's really kind of taking the cake. So what a lot of research has shown is that giving up big plays on offense is how you, or on defense, the other team gets big plays on you, is how you can lose a lot of games. You want to play a lot of bend, but don't break defense. That's sort of the adage that the data says you should use, the analytics says. So what has Brandon Staley done? He does a lot of 2 deep safeties, plays a lot of soft coverages, doesn't let teams run the ball, but allows them to run the ball really well. Here's the problem with that. You've got a superstar pass rusher in Nick Bosa. If the other team is just running the ball and throwing quick passes, you're taking the game out of his hands. It's harder for him to make big plays. Second of all, if the other team is running the ball, controlling the clock, guess who keeps that on this? Guess who's on the sideline? Your star quarterback, Justin Herbert, in that high-flying offense. And I think, that side of the analytics and that side of the data that Staley is using, I mean, that works if you don't have a potential superstar quarterback and a superstar pass rusher. That makes a lot of sense. But I think Staley is really hurting the team here. Not so much with the fourth downs. That's a whole nother topic that we can talk about. But some of his other decision-making that he's kind of not thinking about what is the real strength of his team a little bit and playing against their strengths. I'm curious what your thoughts are on Brandon Staley.
Yeah, I like data and analytics. I like the analytical play calling, except when it bites you on 2-point conversion attempts. That kind of sucks. But I do like data and analytics. But I think, like you said, a key thing here is data and analytics and play calling and looking at this data-driven play calling. It is a measurement of an average across the league, like on average, how many times this work, average. When you have an above average piece, you have to take that into account against the averages. Okay, on average, on third down, it's best to run this play, or it's best to, on average, let them run the ball this. Well, on average, you don't have Joey Bosa and you don't have Derwin James. You need to put those pieces into play because they are above average. They're above the averages, and you need to let those guys shine. Like, on average, you don't have Austin Eckler's or Justin Herbert's, Keenan Allen, Mike Williams, Rashawn Slater's. Those guys are all who I would consider to be above average. You can't... I see this because Baltimore is very reliant on analytics as well, and it has worked for them, but it also has not worked for them in the last few games that I have seen. And I think analytics is a trend that on the meter, no one trusted analytics, and then someone started doing analytics, and it became successful, and then everyone trusted analytics, and we're on like an unbalanced, heavily analytics-based scale. It needs to come back towards the center, and we need to get more coaches' gut instinct in there. Like, hey, my Dak Prescott, he's gonna throw the bomb here. Let's go for it on third down here and not run to get a fourth and short. So coaches have to coach, and coaches have to trust their gut. You can't just be like, I think it's almost sort of like a cop-out when you're like, oh, I was just going by the analytics. I was going to trust the numbers. That's why it did. The numbers said it would work, but it didn't work. That's a kind of a cop-out answer. At the end of the day, as the coach, you got to make the choices, and Brandon Staley has not been making very good choices.
No, he's not. One of the things I look at for coaches is, do you lose games you should have won, winnable games, and do you win games you should have lost? This is sort of what, like, Harbaugh, the Belichicks, the Andy Reids, the good coaches, right? They find a way to win games they should have lost, and they almost rarely lose games they should have won. And the Chargers are the opposite. They should have beaten Kansas City at home a few weeks ago. They lost that game just, all the failed fourth downs, and they lost that game in overtime. They lost to a bad Houston team by double digits. They had no business losing that game.
No.
So, and I think that goes back to the head coach. And you mentioned something that's very interesting. I want to circle back to a little bit here, is the fact that the analytics are an aggregate. They're an average, and if you have above average players in certain positions, that should factor into it. Brandon Staley is essentially coaching as if he has a backup quarterback, as if he has an average defensive line. If one of the reasons that, the data may show, hey, it's better to go for it on 4th and 4 or whatever, is because teams that have like Tom Brady or Patrick Mahomes or Aaron Rodgers, they may go for it more because they have better players. So they may get it more. Yeah. So that actually bumps up the average. Right. So you're not really thinking, I'm curious, right? This would be, imagine if they looked at the fourth down data, using that as an example, and removed like Aaron Rodgers. Yeah. They removed Aaron Rodgers and Pat Mahomes and Tom Brady, what the numbers would look like. And I bet it would be just night and day, completely different. Because that's just how it works. When you take the average, like you said, there's going to be some outliers, some extremes. And if you don't account for that, like you said, and don't understand that's an average, that can really hurt your football team. And Brandon Staley, like you said, is. And they've got 2 big games finishing out the season. They have games against the Raiders and the Broncos. They're 8-7 right now. They're actually on the outside of the playoffs looking in. And, this could be, depending on, as much as we talked about Baker Mayfield disappointing that Cleveland organization, if the Los Angeles Chargers, I mean, you and I thought they were a Super Bowl contender at one point this season.
Absolutely.
If they miss the playoffs, I mean, this is a lot of blame that falls squarely on Brandon Staley.
Yeah, these next two games, Raiders, Broncos, are tough divisional games and absolutely must win. The Chargers have to finish 10-7 because the Chiefs are kind of riding high right now. You gotta finish 10-7 to have a chance to sneak into the playoffs. And I think if Staley, I think he needs to seriously reconsider his coaching style and some of his decisions if they do not make it into the playoff this year. I think he needs to reconsider them anyways, but if they don't make into the playoffs this year, I think his job is going to be on the line next year if he continues coaching the way that he is coaching.
Yeah, I'd agree 100%. But let's move on to someone who's, or at least two guys whose jobs we thought were definitely on the line and probably not heading like they wouldn't have jobs anymore. Turns out they do. News reports have been released showing that New York Giants head coach and quarterback Joe Judge at coach, Daniel Jones at quarterback, are both being retained, returning for next season, despite disappointing, to say the least, results the last couple of years with those two guys running the show. What are your thoughts on the Jones-Judge situation in New York?
I don't get it. I mean, the fact they released Dave Gettleman, the GM, or he wasn't released. He's agreed to retire after this season.
Yes. Agreed to retire.
Yeah. So Gettleman is gone, but Judge and Jones are staying. I think the choice Gettleman made to reach for Daniel Jones at the number 6 position a few years ago was a pretty big stretch, and people questioned it, and now we can see that they were probably right to question it. Danny Dimes has kind of flipped to Danny Pennies. He hasn't been quite as interesting as he has been a few years ago, and Joe Judge really just hasn't impressed me that much. He's been okay at points and times. They've had a few surprising wins, but that's it. They've had a very few wins this year. I really don't see how you say that Daniel Jones is your guy here. I am not seeing it at all. I know that Mike Glennon and Jake Fromm aren't your guys, but I don't see how you stick with Daniel Jones. You got it. Too many teams are sinking in on, we spent an early pick on these guys. I think the Cardinals, even though their season has kind of taken a slide the last few weeks, I really applaud them from drafting Rosen early and then realizing he wasn't the answer and immediately moving him on from him the next season into Murray, who's obviously played out much better than Rosen ever did, because Rosen never started, really. I think more teams need to be able to bite the bullet and move on from a guy if he's not the guy. The Browns can't do it. The Giants aren't doing it. And some of these younger quarterbacks who maybe are stinking it up, they need to figure that out as well.
Yeah, and you used a phrase there I think aptly describes the situation. That's sunk cost fallacy. Right. I think we all know guys who, with their investments or anything like that, they pick a stock, they pick a company, and they really like it. They do some research. They think that stock's going to go up, and it goes down. The stock price goes down. The company doesn't perform well. There's bad news. The market's tough. And what do? They sit there and say, well, I just waiting for it to bounce up, and then I'll sell. I'll wait for it to get my money back, or I'm waiting. I know it'll come back. Give it more time. And look, Daniel Jones has had 3 years as a starter for the New York Giants. He has finished below average in the following categories every single one of those 3 years: passer rating, completion percentage, yards per game passing, turnovers, yards per passing attempt. Every single year he's been below average. Those are the 5 numbers that essentially matter for quarterback play, and he is below average in the NFL in all of them every year. If Daniel Jones was a stock, he would be tanking right now. And just the Giants are kind of like the bad investor who holds on to that, says, well, I'm just going to wait for it to bounce. If I give it another year, if I bring in some, if I just wait, I know the good news will come around the corner. It's like you said with Arizona, sometimes the right thing is to just cut your losses, move on. right? There is no evidence that's showing you that Daniel Jones is going to turn it around and be a winning stock for you, so to speak, right? There's nothing that'll show it. He's been bad every year of his career. He's had injuries. He's had turnovers. Their offense has stunk, even with him at the helm. There is no evidence. And look, here's the other side of it that's a big problem, is that what self-respecting general manager, like elite general managing candidate, is going to go to a Giants organization where they know they already have Daniel Jones at quarterback and they have Joe Judge at head coach, right? Because the general manager's got to come in and try and figure out who he wants to run the football side from a head coach and who he wants at quarterback. What GM's going to say, hey, I want to go to an organization where I know I'm stuck with a coach that's had 2 double-digit losing seasons and a below-average quarterback that looks like a bust. That's not going to happen. No good GM is going to want to go in that situation. And so the cycle is going to keep perpetuating in New York. I think they should cut their losses from both these guys, to be honest. And even if you like Joe Judge as a coach, you need to at least get rid of Daniel Jones. There's no evidence saying he's going to be a good player.
Yeah, I think Jones or Judge, really, either one of them, has about as much chance as bursting out of the cellar as my $10,000 Dogecoin investment does.
Yeah.
So, there's no hope for them. The people need to cut their losses and move on. So, let's move on. Same division, new team, another crazy story. Not a little bit more crazy than this. Teammates fighting this weekend on the sideline. It was the Dallas-Washington football game. Washington had a little scuffle. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. So Washington played at Dallas, Sunday Night Football, national television, most watched game in America every week. And Dallas is absolutely obliterating Washington. Washington had some injuries, some COVID issues. They weren't that great to begin with, and Dallas has been on a roll. Dallas blew them out. Offense marched up and down the field. And Washington defensive linemen, good players, Pro Bowl first-round picks, Jerron Payne and Jonathan Allen got in an altercation, and Jonathan Allen punched Jerron Payne, closed fist punch, right on the sideline. I have never seen that before on an NFL sideline. Not 2 players going at it, punching each other. You see them yell and scream and maybe push and shove, but never a punch. And there was this big reaction and whoa, this is huge. What's going on here? They've lost control of the organization. I've got 2 thoughts. There's these people in the media, and you see it and say, well, that kind of things happen. People don't see it in the locker room. Sometimes you get punched, sometimes shoves, fights happen. You got competitive, juices are flowing. That just happens. You just saw that, it just happened to be on TV. And okay, I get that. I understand that completely. That kind of things happen. I've seen it happen in my college days. We've seen fights break out in the locker room. People get punched, things like that. I will say this, though. I've only seen it happen on teams that I played in that weren't very disciplined. That had losing seasons, that didn't have the right culture and environment. So while this incident happened on live television and everyone around America saw it and is talking about it, I think the bigger issue here is this only happens with teams that have culture issues. So as much as this was a fight between 2 defensive linemen, this is yet another example of Washington, just organization top down, whether it's Dan Snyder, the owner, now Ron Rivera, the head coach. They can't control this roster. They can't control this organization. This is the kind of thing that bad organizations and bad teams do. It just is. Like you saw the Jaguars issues, right, that they had earlier in the year with obviously the Urban Meyer situation and the kicking the kicker and on the warm-ups and all that stuff. Like that's the thing that bad organizations do. Good organizations may have bad years, but they never do this kind of stuff. And that's one thing I've noticed. I've been around teams that have been bad teams, and there have been lots of fights. I've been around teams that are good teams, and there's a lot less of this. So I think this is just a big indictment on Ron Rivera, Dan Snyder, and the Washington organization.
Yeah, it's not a great look for Washington, and it's not a great look for Rivera, a coach who usually kind of rules with an iron fist, so to speak. The team really respects him, and you'd think he could get this under control. But sometimes stuff does happen, and it's not necessarily on him, but it's on him to correct it. But I think that was an interesting piece, but it kind of leads us into our next quick story we're going to talk about. Same teams, a few weeks ago, Dallas was visiting Washington. And Washington, being a Dan Snyder-run organization, doesn't necessarily spend money where it needs to be spent, and they allegedly have had subpar away side seating. So Jerry Jones, being the classy owner he is, said, guys, I'm not going to let you sit on this subpar seating. We're going to import our own sideline benches to the Washington football team's stadium. We got first-class benches, and these benches look nice. Very nice. So I think this offended Washington. And now reports were last week at Philly, Washington, for no reason, brought their own benches. And then again this week to Dallas, they brought their own benches with them to organizations who most likely had perfectly good away side benches for the teams to sit on. And correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't that the gist of kind of what this saga has been?
Exactly. You're exactly right. Washington as an organization has just struggled, right? And this is, while it's kind of funny, the whole bench saga and stuff that's been going on, it sort of shows how bad this organization is run. Like, the benches are one of the easiest things to get right. Right. It's just, hey, let's just have a bench that's an NFL standard quality. I'm sure you can buy them in, like, there are suppliers and vendors that do this kind of thing. This is so easy. This is the easy part. Winning games is hard. Drafting, scouting players is hard. Having like something you sit on that works should be easy. Washington can't get even that right. I think that's kind of almost a weird link between these two stories. I think it's all interconnected. I think it all just goes back to Dan Snyder and Ron Rivera too. Got to blame him as the head coach. They both have lost, control of the organization, and their reaction, Washington's reaction, was so stupid because no one said that Washington's home benches were crappy or that Philadelphia or Dallas's away benches were crappy. So like their response was, we'll just bring our own road benches to Philly and Dallas, and Philly and Dallas are like, okay, sweet, we get to save some money.
How crazy is it that they spend money on benches to take on the road with them, but they weren't going to spend money to upgrade their own? That's their response. They're not going to upgrade their own away side benches. They may have. I'm assuming they didn't, though. Or at least they didn't beforehand. But now, since they feel insulted that somebody brought their own benches, they have invested money into their own traveling away side benches. Like, why don't you just fix the issue? Oh, sorry, guys. We'll invest money in some new benches. Not a big deal. Like, that's that's such a Washington football team response to an issue that is about them.
Yeah, just total organizational failure. It's just misdirection. It's either incompetence or attempted misdirection. I think they're just trying to misdirect, to be honest, because that's what they did with the email saga, right? They're under investigation. They leaked the Gruden emails. They've got all this other, they've got the seat issue, right? The bench issue. So instead of fixing the benches, they bring their own with them on the road. I think it's just another misdirection, and for an organization that's in disarray. And I think Washington, they're really struggling right now. There's no doubt about it, and it starts at the top.
Yeah, that's very interesting to me. I just thought it was a funny story to touch on. Another story, and we talked about him earlier, someone who we love on this show. I'd say it is probably one of our favorite players that isn't on one of our own teams. Gardner Minshew, the Philadelphia Eagles backup quarterback. Should he be the backup? I don't know. But he at least made the case or tried his best, and I love it. I like the moxie. I like the spunk. I think you have the quote. What was exactly said, or what did they say Minshew had said?
Right. So this is Chris Mortensen reporting for ESPN, mentioned that Minshew went into Eagles head coach Nick Sirianni's office after their Week 13 game and Minshew asked Sirianni what it will take for him to earn the starting job going forward. Sirianni told Minshew it is, quote, not going to happen, unquote, and that the team is committed to Hurts for the remainder of the season. And I've got to go ahead.
That's just crazy to me.
Yeah, I've got two thoughts on this. And the big one is, we've hit on it already a number of times today, is, don't be stuck on one guy, right? Cleveland's stuck so much on Baker Mayfield. We've seen what happened with them, but we've seen what good teams have done. You talked about the Cardinals had Josh Rosen. They moved off of him and got Kyler Murray. So much better for it. Andy Reid had Alex Smith. They were winning a lot of games. They moved off of him, went to Pat Mahomes. Buffalo went to a playoff game with Tyrod Taylor. Move off of him. Go Josh Allen. Patriots moved off of Cam Newton, Jared Stidham, right? Remember Stidham, right? He was supposed to be a guy. Go to Mac Jones. Even Sean McVay, they went to a Super Bowl with Jared Goff. Hey, move off him. I want Matt Stafford. Don't be stuck on one guy unless he's something amazingly special. And let's be honest, Jalen Hurts is not amazingly special. This guy has a losing record at this point in his career. Now, he's done a lot of good things. He's an exciting player. He can make big plays with both his arms and his legs and continues to get better week after week. I think he's got a good career in front of him. I'm a fan, especially for what he did at Alabama. But he is, at least right now, not looking like this amazing elite talent that's ready to just take over the NFL. Why would you, commit at this point all into Jalen Hurts? And I got one other thought too with this is players talk, especially free agency, offseason, things like that. Any player that say they were had a good year, running back, receiver, something like that for a team, they're a free agent, and they're looking to go to Philly. Let's say they're a wide receiver. And they drafted Devontae Smith and they drafted Jalen Reagor, but I think I'm better than Reagor and maybe I compete with Devontae Smith. That agent is going to go to that solid receiver and say, look, you don't want to go to Philly because Sirianni's just stuck on the guys that, he has already there. He's not willing to move off guys. Right? Players and agents talk. Like, this is going to be a big deal affecting the Eagles going forward, signing players if they don't change this attitude.
Absolutely. And I think the thing you touched on it, and it's so right, don't just tell the guy, yeah, no, you have no chance. At least say, like, oh, you can give them some generic bullshit answer like, hey, you start picking it up in second team practice, you're doing well, we might work you in the ones a little bit every so often, see how you do there. Don't just be like, hey, yeah, you have no chance. Obviously Minshew is a solid player. I don't think he's ever really had a committed enough spot to where we can say for sure if he's the real deal or if he's not the real deal. He's never been given a good enough chance, but he has performed quite well when given a chance with the Jags and with the Eagles. I think that Philly makes a mistake here by not at least entertaining a cheaper option probably than Jalen Hurts that they can move on to. But if anything, Minshew has his answer, and we can at least see him move on to a team that is maybe a little bit more accepting of him next season. And I'm excited to see where he goes because I love him as a player. I love him as a personality. I've always said I think he's the next Ryan Fitzpatrick. I think he can fit into that role. A smart player. He's got a lot of moxie. He's got a lot of character. I think he's a great quarterback, a great team locker room type of guy.
Yeah, and you hit on something there that I want to cover is that this guy being Minshew, really popular in the media, really popular in the fan base, really popular in the locker room. People love Minshew. They love his leadership. They love just his moxie, like you said, everything about him. And I think, losing Minshew or kind of beating that down like Sirianni did, that kind of hurts that flow a little bit. And I will say, though, I do agree with you here. I'm excited to see where Minshew ends up in the offseason. There's a number of options. I mean, you can go in the division. You can go Washington. Heck, maybe even the Giants make a move at him. Who knows? I mean, this whole bench rivalry could take a whole nother level if Minshew leads to Washington.
That would be quite the story. We'll see where he goes. We're going to keep a close eye on this, Minshew being one of our favorite players to follow. But another story we love to follow is the Jacksonville saga. We posted a story last week, and right as we posted it, Urban Meyer gets fired, and so it's time to take the next step in this Jacksonville story. Nick, Jacksonville has fired Urban Meyer. They are now looking for a new coach. There's been some options that popped up. But we, as fans of talent, we want to see Trevor Lawrence be successful. We want to see the Jaguars return to form of that AFC Championship level that they played at. Let's give this struggling Jacksonville front office some advice. Jacksonville, you haven't been successful the last few years in getting a coach, but we have some advice for you in your coaching interviews to help you not repeat your mistakes from the past. All right, Nick, I'm going to kick it to you for the first piece of advice that we should give Jacksonville in their coach recruiting saga.
Absolutely. The interview process here is going to be crucial for the Jaguars. And I think it's important that they take some of the lessons from the Urban Meyer situation and apply them going forward. And we're here to help out the Jaguars organization because that's what we do. So the first tip we got for the Jaguars is place a hidden camera in the hotel bar of the head coaching candidate when he comes to town. Monitor how he handles the situation. Does he potentially grope young blonde women? Bonus points if you place a hidden camera in a bar in this head coach's college town when he goes to visit. If you can find a bar that is owned and operated by the organization that this coach is a partner with, that's even more bonus points. So that's tip one. Put a hidden camera to monitor your head coach candidate's nightlife.
That's a very good tip. Something else that we may want to do, and like you said, if we don't look into the past, we're destined to repeat it. So call this coach in for an interview, all right? But as he's walking into the interview, strategically placed in front of your office door, you should have your star kicker doing some stretches, getting ready, just sitting there. First of all, see if the guy calls him by his name or if he says, "Hey, kicker, what are you doing?" But secondly, let's see if he walks by, if he throws like a little kick to the shin. It could be playful. That's something to come, though. See if he attacks your kicker if he's in the hallway set up for anything like that. But have your kicker out there as a little bait and see if he tries to attack your kicker.
That's an excellent interview tip. And so we're 2 down. We'll give you another one here, Jackson. We'll give you 2 more, actually, because we're kind of in a giving mood right now. Interview tip number 3. Ask the coach about some of their favorite players. Preferably pick players that this coach coached at least 15 years ago and then busted out in the NFL. Show pictures of these players and ask the coach if he sees them fitting in as a tight end position, even though that player has never, ever played tight end before at any point in his life. Ask the coach if he would then give that player a roster spot throughout all of training camp instead of a quality player that could help out your team. If he answers yes or even lightly considers the idea, that may be a red flag.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty big red flag. Asking how he feels about old players. So keep that on the list and keep that up top. This is like a checklist. Let's say if they hit 2 out of these 4, immediately just cut them off the list. Just cut them off. Say, nope, not on the list anymore. But finally, the thing that we want you to do is bring the coach in, and during the interview process, ask that coach, what is your biggest loss, the game that you lost the worst, in your opinion? Now, ask them, who is to blame for that loss? And see if they blame, like, every other coach and player on their entire roster and don't talk about how it was on them as the coach in an appropriate coaching-based answer. See if he starts bad-mouthing all of his assistant coaches. See if he says that his players suck. Just see who he blames, and if he doesn't blame himself like any self-respecting coach would, be like, "Oh, yeah, that one was on me. We got to work harder." You might want to, keep that as another red flag on the checklist.
Yeah, I agree. These are 4 good points. Jaguars owner organization. We highly recommend you follow all these 4 to the letter. Mize was generous. He said if you get 2 of these checked off, that's a red flag. I would say if you get at least 1, that's a very scary red flag for any of your coaching candidates. But we wish you luck, Jackson, in your head coaching search. And please don't hesitate to give us a shout out when you follow these tips to find your next guy to run your organization.
Absolutely. Finally, Nick, a new segment that we have brought in I'm very excited about. It is our wins and fails segment, specifically our Pro Bowl wins and fails. All right, I'm going to let you go first, Nick. The first player that you selected was Lamar Jackson.
Right. So when it comes to be a Pro Bowl player, there are 3 things I look for. 1, the clutch factor. Do you come up with big plays and big situations, right? And this is Lamar Jackson, 100% done this, big comebacks throughout the career. Kansas City, Minnesota, Indianapolis, no doubt about it. There's been others too. He's been a clutch player. But the number 2 on the list is consistency and availability. And this is where Lamar Jackson falls off the list. He's missed 3 games due to injury and illness and part of the 4th. He's had a few real stinkers of games. He had a 4-pick game against Cleveland that you and I saw live. So for the consistency factor, week in and week out, I can't give Lamar Jackson the nod here. And number 3, production. And again, this goes back to the interceptions. He's had a lot of interceptions, has a below average passer rating. His offense was inconsistent even before he got hurt. 10 points against Miami, 16 against Cleveland, 19 against Pittsburgh. I don't think the production's been there for Lamar Jackson. He was voted to the Pro Bowl. This is a big fail in my mind. He should not have been a Pro Bowl quarterback.
Yeah, sadly, as a Ravens fan, I think Lamar's a great player. I think we have a good future. But this year is not the year to vote. And I think, like you said, there's got to be some factors that they have into Pro Bowl voting, and they need to look at all of the factors before they make their decision. But I'd agree, this is a fail. Who do you have next on your list?
So the next guy on my list is Kyle Pitts, tight end for the Atlanta Falcons. Again, going back to the 3 factors I talk about: clutch, consistency and availability, and stats production. In clutch, Kyle Pitts has been there. He had big catches to win the games against the Miami, the Jets in the middle of the year. How about consistency? This guy started and been in every game this season as a rookie. Big deal there. And he has at least 2 catches in every game. That's big. He never disappears. He's always, active and engaged in a big focal point of that offense. And then number 3, production. This guy is 3rd among all NFL tight ends in receiving yards. He has more tight end receiving yards than George Kittle. He leads the NFC. Of the top 30 players in receiving yards, tight ends and receivers in the NFL, he is 5th in yards per catch. This is an absolute win having to the Pro Bowl. This guy's been a focal point for an offense that's been up and down and inconsistent, but Pitts has been a big-name player for them since day one, coming out of Florida as a rookie this year. And I give the Pro Bowl voting staff a lot of credit here. There was probably some temptation to go with some bigger names on better teams. You look at Zach Ertz, Arizona, Dalton Schultz for Dallas, or Dallas Goedert in Philly. But Kyle Pitts has been a better player in all of them. He's been productive. He's been efficient. He's been available in every game, and he's made clutch plays multiple times this season. Great win for the Pro Bowl team getting Kyle Pitts on board.
Yeah, and I love Pitts. I picked Pitts as my preseason offensive rookie of the year. I don't know if he's going to quite make that cut because of the team that he was on. Wasn't able to get him the stats that he needed, but he's been fantastic. So I absolutely love your win here. Kyle Pitts, big win for the Pro Bowl committee. But moving on to my wins and fails. First up, I have another Falcons player, not planned, it just so happened to be, Cordero Patterson for the Falcons. Phenomenal player. Absolutely great this season. And he's been a dual threat. As of right now, he has 579 receiving yards, 6 touchdowns. He has 523 rushing yards and another 5 touchdowns. So over 1,000, almost 1,100 total yards and 11 touchdowns. That is some pretty good production, and I think the versatility that Patterson has been unparalleled. You don't see anyone play the position that he is playing. He's one of the best hybrid players out there right now, and I think that it is an absolute fail that they did not elect Cordero Patterson to the Pro Bowl this year. I think he much deserved it. He, like Pitts, was a star on a not-so-star-studded Atlanta Falcons team. He battled through adversity. They lost their top receiver. He took a big step up and was able to, take the leap and be the guy that they could lean on. And really this year, outside of Pitts and Patterson, no one's scoring points on the Atlanta Falcons. So I think is a huge missed opportunity for the Pro Bowl committee.
Yeah, exactly. Patterson's done everything. He's been clutch, had that huge catch to beat the Saints in the Superdome. He's been obviously very consistent. He's been a receiver and running threat, extremely productive, like you already mentioned. I think the thing that hurts Patterson, and this is one of the problems with the Pro Bowl, Patterson's a good football player. He's not a wide receiver. He's not a slot receiver. He's not a running back. He's kind of everything, right? Does a lot of it really well, extremely versatile. He's a heck of a football player. Unfortunately, there isn't a spot on the Pro Bowl that's called football player. And I think a lot of the Pro Bowl committee kind of just lost sight of that, right? It says, well, he doesn't have enough rushing yards to be a Pro Bowl running back and not enough receiving yards to be a Pro Bowl receiver. The heck with that. This guy's been a star. He's been a great player all season. It's been just an awesome deal to watch him play. I agree with you. This is a fail that he's not on the Pro Bowl.
Well, that's what we should do. We should add in Pro Bowl position best football player. Best football guy. I think that should be our new position. But I agree, and I'm glad you agree. Patterson, my fail. Next up, very surprising. We picked these independent of each other, so not a coincidence. But I have picked a Ravens player. Not surprising for me, but Mark Andrews. I think not only Mark Andrews being selected to the Pro Bowl was a win for me, but Mark Andrews being selected as a starter over Travis Kelce, someone that people like to throw around as one of the better tight ends out there, is my big win. And I'll go off of your metric, Nick. 1, has he been productive? 1,200 receiving yards, probably first in all of tight ends. 9 touchdowns, probably in the top 2 or 3 of all tight ends. And he's got 12.8 yards per catch, which is pretty dang good as well. He has been very productive. Has he been consistent? Yes, he has been the most consistent player on Baltimore all year. He's clutch. He is able to make big plays all game. Whenever people get blanketed or forgotten during the game, there's always been one guy on Baltimore who has shown up every single game, and we've seen it live. We'll probably see it again this coming weekend, the Rams game. He is always open, and he's always making. And do you remember the catch he made in the Browns game where he gets knocked over on pass interference and somehow manages? He makes the most insane catches as well. So he's been clutch, he's been inconsistent, and he's been available. He's absolutely my win for the Pro Bowl this season.
And there's another fact about Andrews here that I think you'll agree with is, he's a receiving threat, but with the injuries Baltimore has had at tight end, right? They're blocking tight ends, have had some injuries, and obviously on the offensive line. He's had to do a lot of time blocking.
He stepped up major.
So he's been a high-level impact blocker, and he's still extremely productive as a receiver. A lot of teams, they have like a second tight end that they kind of fill in to do more blocking in certain situations. Not with Andrews and not with Baltimore. He's been able to step up and be a great blocker and a great receiver. And I can't tell you the number of games where I watch Baltimore, big third and fourth down, where, all they really have to do is basically cover Mark Andrews. And teams can't. He has been able to just beat zone, beat man, makes great catches. He's an awesome player and 100% win here. Deserves to be a starter in the Pro Bowl. He's had an amazing season. So shout out to Mark Andrews.
And I think win, fail for us, good on us for recognizing the tight ends. One of my favorite position, hybrid blocking, pass-catching tight end, or pass-catching blocking fullback, 2 of my favorite positions. So good for us, and good for you. I think people have said Jackson has done a lot this season, and yeah, he's done a lot with a little, but no. He's had some very messy games in the turnover department, and I don't think that he deserves to be there. So I think getting away from people making it in on name recognition alone is something we need to get away from. And I think the Pro Bowl voting, I think it's done entirely too early in the season because there's still like 3 or 4 more games that, like you said, if your metric, what was it? Clutch, consistent, and availability.
It's clutch, it's consistency, and it's production.
Yeah. So if you disappear the last 4 games of the season, I don't think that you deserve to be in the Pro Bowl. I think it has to be a season-long thing.
Right. Like we've talked about, you can have a bad game or 2. Obviously, you can miss a game or 2. But, when you look at Jackson, who's missed essentially 4 games due to injury and illness, and he's had, 2 real stinkers when I look at the Miami game and I look at the Browns game that you and I went to, that's 6 games, 6 out of 15 games where he's missed or had bad. Look, that's just not enough. He's had a great first half of the season. Don't get me wrong, especially with the comebacks. But you can't be a Pro Bowler on the strength of 9 out of 15 games.
Yeah. And this is the same thing where Jackson has been on the bad end. This is like us last year with Dak. When Dak gets injured, Dak had one of the best starts to the season ever, but we can't vote him in off of such a hot start because he got hurt and he missed the rest of the season. I absolutely think he was an MVP Pro Bowl candidate last year when he got off to such a hot start with Dallas. But then he gets hurt, and we can't just say, okay, well, he started off strong. Let's just vote him in anyways. You can't. Jackson started off strong, but he's kind of fizzled out, whether it's because lack of team being injured and things like that. But anyways, he's fizzled off, and we just can't let that slide, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. But I think that's a good wins and fails, man. That was fun. It's a good segment. Good. Gonna have to do more of those.
Absolutely. And Nick, I believe, unless you have anything else, that has brought us to the end of our show. It's a great show. I think we did a good job. Any last words you have for the people?
Yeah, just thanks for everyone who tuned in and watched and listened to us, however you watched us or listened to us. We really appreciate it. Please give us a like, a comment, or subscribe on whatever platform you use. You can find us at Saturday Morning Inspection on all of the major viewing and listening platforms like we talked about at the beginning of the show. You can find us on our website, smishow.com. You can check out our news where you can sign up for a newsletter for all kinds of the latest and greatest NFL news and funny memes and videos and things like that. You can find us on Twitter and Facebook at SMI Football Show. Once again, we greatly appreciate everyone tuning in, listening, and watching however you did it. I'm Nick Rudman. That's Andrew Mize. Mize, any final thoughts?
That's it. I'm excited to see you this weekend. We will be at the Ravens versus Rams game. It's going to be cold. It's going to be wet. And I hope the game doesn't stink. So I'm excited, and I will see you then.